Listening to the radio as America breaks into civil war. Turn around if you are headed toward the Missouri River Bridge out of Jefferson City. I mean right now. Do not roll up slow to get a look. Do not stop on the shoulder. Do not pull out a phone. 10 minutes ago, a man on the north side opened fire from an upper floor of an empty office building near the riverfront, and the line of cars stacked at the checkpoint had nowhere to go. One pickup got shoved sideways. A white box van backed into the lane behind it. People started running between bumpers. Then somebody at the checkpoint fired back. Then somebody else from farther up the road started firing too. And now nobody down there knows who was shooting at whom first. I can hear some of it through the basement vent when the generator load drops and the fan slows down. If you are still south of downtown, stay south. If you are north, stay north. Do not try to cross the river in this county tonight. I know a lot of you want clean answers. You want to know who controls what, which road belongs to which side, whether the men in body armor at the old inspection lane are federal, state, county, private, or just armed locals with matching tape on their sleeves. I cannot give you a clean map because the map changes every few hours, and half the people holding guns are not following any chain of command you would recognize from last month. What I can tell you is real and current. The state office complex emptied in a rush before noon. The last marked patrol cars that came by this courthouse arrived with 2 flat tires and a back window shot out. We have county deputies downstairs, a clerk, 1 emergency management tech who has not slept right in 3 days, 2 ham radio men working folding tables, and me talking into a microphone that used to cover ball games and school board debates. That is what this is now. If you are on Interstate 70, anywhere between Columbia and Warrenton, get off if you still can, and do not trust big signs, hand-painted sheets, or men waving you towards safe processing. We have had 3 separate reports since late morning of fake reroute points set up near service roads and county exits. One was outside Kingdom City. One was west of Warrenton. One was farther east, close to the Wentzville spread where the lanes knot together and nobody has room to think. In 2 of those cases, cars were stripped for fuel and medicine. In the third, people were sorted by what stickers were on their trucks and what kind of ID they carried. I do not care what rumor you heard about humanitarian corridors. Right now in Missouri, a corridor is only real if people are moving through it both ways, and somebody you know has seen it with his own hour. Do not use US 54 East out of Jefferson City unless your destination is very close and you already know the back roads around the choke points. There is a disabled concrete truck near the shoulder, just past one of the commercial strips, and men have been using it for cover since a little after lunch. Traffic got pinned there when a school bus stalled trying to turn around. The bus has been cleared as far as we know. The driver got people off and into a church parking lot. That part is good. The bad part is the road is still blocked enough that every car coming up too fast has to brake and stack. That creates an easy stop line, and easy stop lines keep getting turned into shakedowns. This is what the country feels like now in practical terms. Not speeches, not flags. Stop traffic and armed men deciding what your family gets to keep. We are getting calls from Fulton, Ashland, Mexico, Sedalia, Rolla, Lebanon, Springfield, St. Charles County, the west side of St. Louis County, and from people farther out who are bouncing messages through whoever still has a working relay. Most of the stories line up in the same ugly way. Somebody cuts power to a substation or fiber to a switching point. Cell service gets patchy. Rumors hit before facts. Men start setting up on overpasses, water towers, grain elevator tops, church roofs, and half-built strip centers, because those are the only places left that give line of sight over a road. The first armed group says it is there to keep order. The second says the first group is lying. By dark, families are flipping mattresses against front windows and pushing refrigerators in front of side doors because nobody knows whose truck will be rolling through after midnight. I need everybody listening to stop repeating that this started today. It did not. Today is just the first day where it got loud enough that nobody can pretend it is still politics. This built for months. Freight slowdowns, National Guard call-ups for transport security, truck weigh stations with temporary fencing going up and never coming back down, state police and federal task forces shadowing each other at fuel depots, port inspections that got stricter, then selective, then openly partisan depending on who was in charge of the county line, then the riots in a dozen cities, then temporary emergency detention sites, then mayors and governors speaking in two different legal languages about who had authority over what, then judges refusing orders, then sheriffs refusing judges, then private security companies getting contracts big enough to field armored trucks and drones and long rifles out in the open. By the time people started saying Civil War out loud, the roads had already been prepared for it. You are hearing a lot of talk about patriot groups, constitutional groups, protective leagues, continuity teams, federal peace detachments, county defense volunteers, special response marshals, and neighborhood guards. Strip the names off. You need to listen for behavior, not labels. If a group is taking insulin from diabetics for centralized medical sorting, that group is a threat. If a group is turning away women with children from a water point because a zip code on an ID card is wrong, that group is a threat. If a group is firing warning shots into crowded traffic to make drivers abandon vehicles, that group is a threat. I do not care what patch is sewn on the vest or what oath a man says he took. Every side in this mess is putting out its own polished language. The roads tell the truth faster than press conferences do. The courthouse basement is running on one diesel generator and a smaller backup unit that coughs every time the fuel feed gets dirty. We have extension cords taped up over old floor tile, 2 battery banks scavenged from an office server room, and a rack of emergency alert hardware that was never meant to run this long without service. When the main building lost city power for the 3rd time, somebody dragged down old fans, surge strips, and boxed microphones. That is what you are hearing through. No nice studio, no producer counting down, no screen full of advertisements, just paperwork shoved aside and men in work boots stepping over charging cables. Every so often a deputy comes down, hands me a torn sheet with a handwritten road report, and goes back upstairs. If I sound flat, it is because there is no room left for performance. We had fresh word from Columbia maybe 25 minutes ago. The overpass trouble on US 63 has spread toward business loops and feeder roads. A group with pickup trucks and agricultural sprayers mounted in the beds had been checking cars for accelerants, according to one caller. Another caller said those sprayers were empty and being used to intimidate, not spray. I cannot confirm which part is true. What I can confirm is this. Traffic around Columbia is not functioning as a through route anymore. It is a series of broken pockets. Downtown streets are blocked by abandoned vehicles. A shopping center lot on the south side got turned into a field aid station for a while, then took rifle fire from somebody in an adjacent building and had to scatter. If you are west of town and thinking you can cut through on county roads, remember the county roads are where local grudges have the most room to turn armed. A woman from St. Peter's called in crying so hard she had to stop 3 times before she got a sentence out. Her husband had been driving a fuel tanker under contract, trying to move a load that had already been rerouted twice. Near the line where several major roads knot together, men in mixed gear blocked the truck with county dump trailers and a loader. She said one man wore camouflage, another wore a private security polo under plate armor, another had a deputy's winter jacket with no badge, and another had a red shop rag tied around his arm. That is the mix now. Nobody even bothers to stay visually consistent. She heard shots over his speakerphone and then nothing. 15 minutes later, a video was circulating showing the trailer disconnected and the cab burning. I am not describing that to upset you. I am describing it because fuel is becoming a military objective in neighborhoods that used to argue about softball schedules and school taxes. This is not just about big cities. Smaller towns are splitting faster in some places because there are fewer neutral zones. In a city, a man can still disappear into a different block for a while. In a town with one pharmacy, one diner, one grain co-op, one church on each end, and one sheriff's lot, every family already knows who posted what online, who donated to which campaign, whose son got deputized, who got fired from the rail yard, who has a backhoe, who keeps pallets of feed, who hunts every year, who has a son in the guard, who has cousins in the prison system, who owns the welding shop, and who has been storing 500 gallons of dyed diesel behind a barn. Once the legal center breaks, all that local memory becomes targeting data. The Missouri River bridges are being treated as frontline assets. Same with the Mississippi crossings on the east side of the state. Bridges always mattered for traffic and commerce. Now they decide whether a county eats next week. You cannot move fuel, oxygen cylinders, bulk food, chlorine drums, medical waste, or refrigerated medicine at any kind of scale if every crossing turns into an armed interview. That is why you keep hearing about snipers near approaches and sabotage near maintenance yards. A county can survive on local goodwill for a few days. It cannot keep a hospital running on goodwill. Hospitals need diesel, oxygen, laundry service, sterile supplies, waste hauling, guards who do not panic, and roads that ambulances can actually use. When bridges become political symbols instead of transport systems, people die in buildings far away from the bridge. There was a story going around earlier that one side or another had blown Bagnell Dam. That is false. Let me say it slow. Bagnell Dam has not been blown. We have heard from enough points around the lake area to be confident about that. There was an attempted breach at a substation feeding transmission lines connected to the grid that serves parts of the region. That is different. Somebody hit fencing, cameras, and control cabinets. Local utility workers got there under armed escort. The line did trip briefly. That fed the rumor. The dam itself still stands. Please stop repeating collapse stories unless you have a direct source. Half this war right now is panic management. Bad information gets people moving at the wrong time, and moving at the wrong time gets people dead faster than ideology does. There is another false message out there using a voice that sounds very close to a county official from mid-Missouri. It tells residents to report to school parking lots for identity verification and ration enrollment. We compared clips. The phrasing is wrong. The pauses are wrong. The man whose voice was copied does not say certain words that way. Somebody stitched together enough public audio to build a fake announcement, then pushed it through text chains and local pages. That is where we are. You cannot even trust the familiar voice anymore without context. So here is the rule we are using here, and I suggest you use it at home. No directive is real unless it arrives through at least 2 separate channels, and one of those channels is a person you can call back directly. A voice clip alone is not enough. A screenshot alone is not enough. A forwarded post alone is not enough. I want to talk about weapons for a second because some of you are treating this like a movie where every street turns into full mechanized battle. That is not what we are seeing in central Missouri today. We are seeing pickup trucks, farm trucks, delivery vans, SUVs with doors shot out, former patrol cars, a few armored cash vehicles, and several utility trucks forced into barricade duty. We are hearing mostly semi-automatic rifle fire, shotguns, hunting rifles, handguns, and a few belt-fed guns likely pulled from official stock somewhere because the rate and report are different. We have had repeated reports of small commercial drones dropping improvised charges or just spotting for shooters. That part is real and practical. A man with a quadcopter and a spotter can control traffic from a parking garage better than a loudmouth with a flag can control it from the ground. A deputy just brought down a message from Wardsville and another from Lynn. People are asking whether the smaller roads south and east are safer than the main lanes. Safer is not the right word. Quieter, maybe. Less observed, maybe. Less useful to organized groups, maybe. But county roads also have blind bends, culverts, tree lines, single-lane bridges, and very little room to reverse if you run into a burned truck or a felled utility pole. If you must move, daylight helps. 2 vehicles help if both are mechanically sound and both drivers are steady. A paper map helps because phone service is still dropping in and out depending on tower power and fiber backhaul. What does not help is moving in a 10-car family caravan with children spread across 3 rows and no one agreeing on who is leading. That is how people freeze up under pressure and box each other in. We just got a verified report that a nursing home transfer bus out of the outskirts of Jefferson City made it to a church lot after stalling on a rise. That crew had almost nothing to work with. 1 maintenance man, 1 nurse, 1 driver, 2 family volunteers, and a deputy who had already been hit in the shoulder earlier in the day and still came along. They pulled residents off a bus 1 chair at a time, while rounds were cracking in the distance from a direction none of them could identify. That is the country underneath all the slogans, not experts with maps. Regular people lifting regular weight with shaking hands, because the system that was supposed to move vulnerable people in an orderly way has fallen apart. If you are armed and listening, and you are standing near any facility with elderly people, disabled people, oxygen tanks, dialysis patients, or a children's ward, do not go near it unless your purpose is to protect it without looting it. Word from St. Louis County is messy but consistent on one point. Large retail corridors have become both resource hubs and firing magnets. Parking lots give room. Rooftops give view. Loading docks give supply. That means any shopping strip with a pharmacy, grocery, hardware store, and fuel station nearby turns into a prize, whether the people trying to hold it call themselves peacekeepers, or resistance, or mutual aid, or official response. A pharmacist from West County said she worked 12 hours straight with a shotgun under the counter and a nurse in scrubs writing names on paper because the electronic system was down. She said the first men through the door wanted antibiotics and pain pills. The second wave wanted insulin and sterile saline. The third wave wanted batteries, tape, and diesel cans. That tells you the phases of collapse better than any national panel show ever could. One of the ham operators here got through to a man outside Springfield who had been on a volunteer fire crew until his station was taken over by a mixed group wearing old turnout gear, camouflage pants, and whatever body armor they could scrounge. He said the city edges are not one solid battlefield, they are broken circles. A subdivision entrance blocked with landscaping stone, a church lot used as a med point, a feed store giving out sacks for 1 hour, then shutting when a drone starts hovering low. A rail crossing held by men with hunting rifles because somebody heard a munitions shipment might be on the line. Most of it is rumor wrapped around real fear. But rumor gets armed too. Once a man posts himself beside a crossing with a scope because of a rumor, somebody else posts across from him to watch him, and then a train horn becomes a trigger. Fort Leonard Wood has shut its gates to casual traffic. That part is plain. Whether units have split in their loyalties, I will not pretend to know from scraps and noise. What I do know is that roads in that whole corridor are being treated as controlled routes. We have one report of a convoy movement order stamped for 0500 that never got carried out because a bridge inspection team found tampering in the dark. We have another report of families with military ID waiting for hours outside a gate they assumed would process them, only to be told to leave because the post had gone into a tighter internal posture. Do not drive toward any major military installation expecting refuge unless you already have instructions from someone whose rank and identity you can verify. Those places are not shelters by default once the country starts breaking at the command level. The internet has not exactly gone away. It has become unreliable in the worst possible way. A lot of people are still getting enough signal to receive half-truths, anger, edited clips, fake orders, old maps, and recycled videos from other states with new captions laid over them. Some fiber routes are down. Some local providers lost backup power. Some cell sites are being throttled by volume and generator limits. Some outages are sabotage. That means people are not disconnected cleanly. They are connected just enough to stay confused. A dead network would at least force neighborhoods to look at their own block and deal with it. This half-alive network keeps convincing a man in Missouri that a 5-second clip from Arizona, Georgia, or Pennsylvania tells him what he should do with his family right now. It usually does not. A little after 4 this afternoon, we got what sounded at first like good news. A ceasefire lane was supposed to open along part of US 50, so ambulances and civilian cars could move east for 1 hour. Word came through county channels, then got echoed by men with rifles at a gas station, then bounced through church groups. Too fast. That should have warned everybody. Within 30 minutes, vehicles started lining up with white cloth tied to mirrors. Some had actual patients inside. Some were just families desperate to get out. As the line stretched, somebody fired from the tree line above a shallow bend. Then there was return fire from at least 2 positions near the road. A deputy upstairs who heard direct traffic said the first rounds may have hit a utility truck, then a pickup, then the whole column locked in place. Cars cannot become safe just because somebody ties white cloth to them. Not in this country now. Not on a crowded lane with no trusted command on both ends. After that failed corridor, every rumor about humanitarian passage got worse. Some people took it as proof that one side had deliberately baited civilians. Some said a third group fired to sabotage talks. Some said a sniper panicked at a truck backfiring. I am not going to choose a story because right now all 3 explanations are possible. That is part of why this is happening the way it is. Too many armed bodies, too many chains of command, too many men operating on forwarded anger and partial facts. You cannot fix a country at rifle length when every roadblock is staffed by men who only trust the last voice that sounded enough like their own. That is not politics. That is fragmentation. And fragmentation kills, slow in the supply chain and fast on asphalt. A lot of you are asking what to do at home if your town has not gone loud yet. I am going to keep this plain. Fill every container you have with water while pressure still exists. Bathtubs, sinks, pots, clean buckets, everything. If your water is already out, stop opening and closing the fridge just to stare at it. Choose what spoils first and cook it now if you still have gas or power. Charge every battery you own. Park vehicles nose out if you have the space. Move flammables away from windows. Pull curtains, but leave yourself a narrow observation gap. Write names, birth dates, medication lists, allergies, and contact numbers on paper, and put copies in more than one place. If you have a firearm and no discipline, that firearm may become a problem instead of a solution once everyone is tired. If you have neighbors you know by face, speak now before the dark gets ideas into people. Boil orders are spreading, and not always because the water itself is immediately contaminated. Some treatment plants are short on chlorine deliveries. Some lost trained operators because workers could not cross a bridge or were told to choose between the plant and their families. Some SCADA links went down. Some facilities are running manually with skeleton crews. A plant can stay physically intact and still fail to deliver safe water if the chemical feed is interrupted or pressure zones collapse. That is why you are hearing mixed reports, where one block has service and the next does not, or where water comes back brown after sitting dead in a line. If you still have gas, boil. If you do not, use whatever purification method you understand and trust. Do not waste time arguing online about ideal methods while your containers sit empty. Hospitals are not limitless. I need that to sink in. A hospital can have a sturdy building and still fail in layers. First, the elective things stop. Then discharge speeds up. Then hallways fill. Then supply closets thin out. Then security gets strict. Then oxygen becomes a tracked item. Then fuel becomes a tracked item. Then waste disposal becomes a problem nobody talks about until it starts backing up. Then laundry gets tight. Then outside specialists stop making it in. Then staff starts sleeping in conference rooms because driving home becomes a risk. Then somebody with a rifle decides the parking deck gives good view over an intersection, and the whole hospital starts taking rounds through windows it was never built to resist. We have word from more than one facility in Missouri that staff are already marking entry points with tape and moving critical care patients away from exterior walls where they can. There are towns right now cutting themselves off from nearby cities, not because they are cruel, but because they are counting food and fuel with actual pencils. A man outside Herman told us his town meeting at a church gym ended with a hard vote. No outside traffic after dark. No fuel sold without local verification. Bridge watched in shifts. Rail spur monitored. Generator power reserved for water pumps and refrigeration first. That sounds harsh until you realize his county has one overworked clinic, a volunteer fire structure already stretched thin, and roads easy to block with one burning tractor. Cities hear that and call it rural abandonment. Rural towns hear city demands and call it organized extraction. That is how lines get harder. Not because every person hates every other person, because every group starts doing arithmetic with shortage stacked on fear. Somebody just asked if Kansas City is gone. No. Cities do not just vanish because the internet wants a dramatic sentence. Kansas City is not gone. It is fractured. Different districts, interchanges, warehouse zones, civic buildings, and residential blocks are under different pressure and different control. That is true of St. Louis, too. The trouble with big places is you can get one clear video of burning trucks under an overpass, and people assume the entire metro has become one continuous battlefield. Not so. The worst truth is more complicated. One neighborhood can still be carrying groceries upstairs, while another one 2 miles away is trading rifle fire around a transformer yard. That patchwork makes movement harder, because nobody can read the city at a glance anymore. You have to know which block, which ramp, which frontage road, which side of the river, which hour. A grain buyer from near Sedalia got patched through about an hour ago. He said the elevator manager there had armed workers on the roof, not because he wanted a showdown, but because a line of trucks had been told by 3 different groups to deliver loads to 3 different secured distribution authorities. Grain sounds old-fashioned until the trucks stop rolling. Then everybody remembers bread and feed come from somewhere physical. Those elevator towers, rail spurs, and warehouse lots look boring in peacetime. In a breakdown, they become targets fast. Men who never thought beyond social media start thinking in calories once the shelves thin out. And once men think in calories with rifles in hand, a lot of moral language peels away in a hurry. We had one call from Cape Girardeau that I need to relay with caution. The bridge there has been repeatedly approached by convoys trying to cross, and repeatedly locked down by armed screens that shift by the hour. A teacher sheltering with neighbors said she could see headlights stack and back up for what felt like miles. She said one side of town was telling people to come west, the other was warning against anyone crossing. She said church bells rang once by accident when power blinked, and the sound alone caused people on her block to think a signal had been sent. And then half the men ran to corners with rifles because nobody trusts ordinary sounds anymore. Think about that. Not a missile, not an artillery strike, a church bell in a stressed town, and men instantly assume coded intent. That is how tight everything is pulled now. The bigger national picture is only useful if it helps you interpret local danger. So here is the broad read from what is still filtering through. Several states are having open standoffs over command authority, transport corridors, and detention policy. Some guard units are following federal activation without open dispute. Some are splitting by leadership or mission set. Some county sheriffs are aligning with state executives. Some are declaring local neutrality and then enforcing that neutrality with armed checkpoints anyway. Some private logistics firms are acting like mini-governments around depots, ports, and distribution yards, because whoever feeds a city block starts feeling entitled to govern it. That is why this no longer fits one clean left-right map or urban-rural map. It is power center against power center, with regular families caught between whichever one is closest. I can hear people upstairs moving file cabinets. That means somebody is hardening doors on the first floor again. We already sandbagged parts of the lobby with courthouse records boxes, maintenance salt bags, and bags of shredded paper wrapped in plastic. Nobody planned for this building to become a communications node. It was built for hearings, paperwork, marriages, property disputes, traffic tickets, and county budget arguments. Now the records room holds bottled water, trauma kits, spare radio batteries, and an old map board with grease pencil route notes. The irony is wasted on everybody because no one has energy for irony. A courthouse is supposed to mean rule of law. Tonight it means thick walls, a basement, and enough outlets to keep 2 radios and a microphone alive. There was shooting downtown about 20 minutes ago that sounded closer than the bridge fire from earlier. Not sustained. 3 to 5 rifles, maybe more. Then a heavier burst that could have been a belt-fed gun or just rapid echo in the street canyon outside. One deputy came down, checked the ceiling instinctively, though he knew that made no sense, then laughed once in the wrong kind of way and went back up. I am telling you this because even buildings that feel solid can become mental traps. People hear thick walls and think safe. Safe is relative. Thick walls help against random rounds and fragments. They do not help if your building sits on a route that 2 groups both decide they need. So if you are sheltering in a public building, ask yourself now whether you also have an exit that does not involve the main entrance. I got handed a paper note from one of the radio men. It says to tell listeners not to use bright porch lights as a sign of safety. Some neighborhoods have been doing that to say, family here, or medics here, or water point here. The problem is bright constant light also marks houses for everyone else. Better to work with shielded light, brief light, or light directed inward where possible. Sound carries too. A generator behind a privacy fence sounds a lot louder at 2 in the morning than it does at 4 in the afternoon. If you are one of the lucky few still with generator fuel, think about exhaust, noise, and the glow from windows before you run it all night. Power is useful. Advertising power is risky. A caller outside Moberly said a freight train loaded with chlorine tank cars was held outside a yard because no crew wanted to risk moving through sabotage reports on the line. That sounds technical and distant until you remember chlorine is not just a rail commodity on paper. Water treatment lives on that stuff. A delayed tank line here means a boil order there. A boil order there means more wood smoke, more scavenging for camp stoves, more pressure on bottled water, more people driving when they should stay home, more desperation at loading docks, more armed men deciding who gets pallets. Everything is connected in the plainest possible way. This is why I keep talking about trucks, rails, substations, and bridges instead of speeches. Infrastructure chooses how long people can stay decent when politics fails. We have had repeated, unconfirmed reports of snipers. Let me tighten that word up before it loses all meaning. A man with a scoped rifle shooting from concealment is not automatically some trained elite. Plenty of what people are calling sniper fire is just a frightened or angry rifleman taking long shots from a roof line, field edge, loft window, or tree stand. That still kills people. It still pins traffic. It still changes behavior. But if you hear one shot from a long distance and start imagining a full professional team controlling your county, you may make worse decisions than the facts justify. Keep the danger real-sized. That means serious, not theatrical. Look for line of sight. Look for high angles. Look for repeated suppression on choke points. Do not build legends while a real man is still in the field. One of the strongest patterns today has been people choosing sides by proximity, not doctrine. That is worth saying plain because some of you still talk like every armed person out there spent months reading manifestos. Most did not. A lot of men are with whoever protected the gas station where their wife got medicine. A lot are with whoever turned away looters on their block. A lot are with whichever deputy or sergeant answered a phone call when no one else did. Some are with the worst group around simply because that was the group sitting on the only functioning water truck or diesel tank when the lights failed. That is how civil wars get built in real neighborhoods, not from pure thought, from immediate need mixed with fear and old resentment. There was a bad stretch near Ashland this afternoon, where a line of civilian vehicles tried to bypass a blocked section of interstate by cutting across frontage roads and commercial lots. One SUV clipped a curb, shredded a tire, and boxed the lane. A man behind him got out screaming. Another driver thought the shouting meant an attack had started and fired a warning shot. Then somebody farther back hit reverse without looking and slammed into a compact car with 2 kids in it. No ideology needed. No organized ambush. Just pressure, heat, fear, too many guns, and no one trained for any of this. When you hear civil war, do not picture only formal firefights. Picture panic collisions, bad turns, diabetic crashes, asthma attacks, stairwell falls, accidental discharges, and people losing each other in crowds while armed strangers decide whether to help. I need to correct one detail from earlier. The box van pinned near the bridge is no longer in the lane. A tow crew, under cover from 2 armored county vehicles, got part of that mess cleared enough for emergency movement only. That does not mean the crossing is open. It means somebody had enough courage or enough orders to drag wreckage under intermittent fire. Those quiet jobs are keeping whole regions from locking up completely. Utility linemen, tow operators, road crews, water techs, maintenance men, dispatchers, nurses, forklift drivers, mechanics, warehouse clerks, and old radio hobbyists are doing more for actual survival right now than 100 men yelling into phone cameras. Remember that when the noise settles enough for history to get written by people who stayed clean. A man from the lake area said his neighborhood association turned into an armed watch in less than 12 hours, and he still could not tell whether that made him safer or just made the timing of trouble more predictable. He said one retired carpenter built road teeth from scrap 2x4s and lag screws. Another man used his skid steer to move concrete barriers. A woman with a nurse background organized medication lists by house. A high school coach started patrol shifts and then had to be removed after he began deciding which homes were useful enough to receive shared fuel. That is another truth. Civilian self-organization is not automatically good just because it is local. Local men can become petty tyrants by sunset if nobody checks them. Human scale does not guarantee decency. We had a brief link with a pastor outside Joplin. He said his building had become a way station not because of doctrine, but because it had a kitchen, freezers, folding chairs, and enough bathrooms to handle a line. He also said he had to turn away 3 armed men who wanted to use the bell tower for observation. That is the sort of decision thousands of small institutions are making tonight. A church can feed people or become a firing position. A school gym can shelter families or become a detention point. A warehouse can distribute bottled water or become a militia depot. The structure itself does not decide. The first armed men through the door decide unless somebody with backbone and local trust says no fast enough. There is gunfire again outside, closer now. Short bursts. I am going to keep talking unless somebody physically drags me off this chair because the whole point of this has become continuity. If the sound cuts out suddenly and then comes back, that means we are shifting power or moving to the deeper records vault. If it cuts out and stays out, assume either the equipment failed or the building got contested. Do not come here. Let me say that clear. Do not drive toward a courthouse, city hall, station, utility yard, hospital, or obvious communications point just because you hear a live voice and think information equals safety. Information attracts desperate people, and desperate people attract armed groups that want leverage. A county worker is motioning at me with another note. It says the water tower on the west edge of town is now under armed guard after someone tried to tamper with ladder access. Good. That should have happened hours ago. Elevated storage, pump houses, substations, relay towers, fuel racks, and bridge control rooms should have been priority sites before political offices and television backdrops ever were. But the country still thinks in symbols first and systems second, and that habit is costing blood now. A speech does not chlorinate water. A slogan does not repair a transformer. A flag does not keep a dialysis machine running. Skilled hands do. Secure routes do. Spare parts do. Boring schedules do. Civil peace depends on boring systems more than anybody wanted to admit. One rumor I want dead right now is the claim that foreign troops are moving through rural Missouri in disguise. I have heard versions of that from 3 callers, and none had evidence stronger than unfamiliar accents, mismatched gear, or strange patches seen from a distance. Stop that. This country has more than enough armed, confused men of its own to create what you are seeing. You do not need an outside mastermind to explain a deputy jacket on a looter or a private contractor vest on a man working an old National Guard truck. All that means is uniforms and equipment have crossed hands, which happens fast once depots get compromised and official lines blur. Do not let fantasy explanations distract you from real local hazards. It is a little after dark now. The basement feels smaller at night because every sound upstairs turns into a question. We have put blackout material over the tiny, high windows on this level. Somebody taped cardboard over an old vending machine because the display light looked too bright. There is cold coffee, diesel smell, wet concrete smell, marker ink, sweat, and old paper down here. One of the ham men keeps rubbing his eyes and then forcing them open wide when a headset crackles. This is what emergency communications really looks like after the polished crews are gone. Not dramatic blue lights, not command screens, just tired workers trying to keep a thread alive between broken places. The line out of Springfield says gun shops, farm stores, and hardware stores were not just stripped for weapons. People are taking chain, tarps, plywood, fasteners, bar oil, batteries, fuel cans, bleach, propane fittings, hose clamps, tubing, portable radios, and bulk feed. That tells you people are settling in for real disruption, not just a weekend riot. Men preparing for a short brawl buy ammunition and chest rigs. Families preparing for a dirty month buy water containers, fence repair, feed, medicine, and ways to patch engines. Watch what disappears from shelves if you want to know what kind of future people think is coming. Across Missouri right now, people are buying for isolation and fortification. There was a stretch of quiet a few minutes ago, and then someone upstairs yelled for lights off in the hallway. Nobody here panicked. That is one small blessing. The first hours of this kind of breakdown are all bad surprises. After that, people start building routines around the danger. Magazine on the table. Tape the cord. Check fuel. Update map. Listen. Write. Repeat. That routine is not comfort. It is just enough order to keep your hands from doing stupid things. So if you are at home and still have any time before your area goes loud, build routines now. Decide watch shifts. Decide who handles the door. Decide who logs names. Decide where the medical kit stays. Decide which room is for sleep and which is for work. Decision made in daylight is worth more than courage improvised in darkness. We have another confirmation of false detainment points. This one near a county line farther west used school buses turned sideways and men in mixed uniforms directing traffic into a fairground. One caller said paperwork was checked. Another said phones were taken. Another said older men were sorted from younger men. I do not know which part came first or whether all 3 happened in that order. I know enough to tell you this. Do not enter fenced processing areas unless you have absolutely no alternative and you understand who controls the gates, who is armed, where exits are, and whether families are being kept together. A lot of desperate people still hear the word processing and think official, temporary, safe. Those words do not naturally belong together anymore. A farm family outside Rolla used a grain auger trailer and 2 manure spreaders to block the road leading to their lane after strangers started probing houses on the section line. Crude? Sure. Effective? Enough for the first night. People laugh at rural improvised barriers until they meet one on a narrow road with ditches on both sides and no room to turn. Every region is using what it has. Cities use buses, dump trucks, concrete blocks, parking decks, chain-link gates. Rural places use tractors, hay bales wrapped wet, culvert pipes, disc harrows, spreaders, and downed timber. That local texture matters. It shapes the war without anybody formally planning it. A man in a polished office may draft control lines on a map. Real control lines are built out of what is within a 5-minute drive when the phone call comes. I keep getting asked which side is winning. Nobody. That is not a clever answer. It is the right one. Every side claiming a quick win is lying, or looking at one favorable hour and mistaking it for a campaign. Even when a group takes a bridge, depot, courthouse, yard, or district, it now has to hold fuel, water, food, medical support, sleep cycles, comms, perimeter discipline, and civilian behavior. That is hard for real armies. It is much harder for a patchwork of state units, federal detachments, contractors, militia groups, local guards, and angry neighbors operating on partial trust. The longer this goes, the more logistics will beat rhetoric. Men can shout about sovereignty, liberty, order, or justice all day. By day 4, they still need diesel filters and insulin. There is another thing regular people need to hear. You are not required to solve the nation tonight. You are required to keep the people near you alive through the next practical problem. Water, heat, medicine, fire risk, noise discipline, sleep, vehicle readiness. Contact with one trusted neighbor. That is not cowardice. That is scale. A lot of bad actors thrive on making ordinary people feel guilty for not joining some grand cause instantly. Then they use that guilt to recruit bodies for roadblocks and raids. If a stranger in body armor tells you the most patriotic thing you can do is leave your family tonight and report to a parking lot you have never seen controlled by men you do not know, you should hear the warning in that before you hear the flattery. A man in Independence came through on relay and described a warehouse district where 3 different groups claimed legal authority over the same load of canned food. One had papers from a federal emergency office. One had papers from a state agriculture office. One had armed contractors hired by the company that owned the goods. While they argued, locals broke into the back and took what they could carry. That is the country in one scene. Overlapping claims, delayed force, missing trust, and citizens watching all the official arguments as nothing more than time bought for the people with actual muscle to grab the pallets first. Legitimacy cannot be argued into existence over a forklift loading ramp if nobody with a rifle believes the same source of law. We just had to kill the ceiling fan nearest the equipment because the power dip almost dumped one of the racks. Small thing maybe, but small things stack. Heat makes tempers shorter. Short tempers make gun handling worse. Bad gun handling makes every crowded room more dangerous. Infrastructure failure always comes down to stacking weak points. The same is true of people. Missed meal, no sleep, bad rumor, wrong turn, loud bang, pride, gun in hand. That sequence is shortening all over the map. If you are listening with other people, keep your tone level. A calm voice is not weakness, it is bandwidth. You need room in your own head to hear what is actually happening. There was a bright flash about an hour back that several callers assumed was artillery hitting near the Capitol. We traced enough of it to say this was likely a transformer event after a line fault, and maybe sabotage near a substation, not conventional artillery. Again, keep the danger real-sized. People hear one big electrical blast and start imagining battalions shelling downtown. That fear sends them running in ways that create more casualties than the original event. We have not had consistent, verified evidence of organized artillery use in this area tonight. Improvised explosives, yes. Rifle teams, yes. Heavy machine guns in limited cases, maybe. Mortar rumors, unconfirmed. Do not escalate your imagination faster than the facts. A woman from Boone County asked if she should let a mixed group of neighbors share her basement because she has the strongest house on the block. I cannot make that call for her, but I can lay out the real parts. More people means more labor, more watch eyes, more tools, more witnesses, more skill if you choose well. More people also means more food use, more conflict, more noise, more sickness, and a greater chance someone's cousin or old feud walks in with him. So do not decide from sentiment alone. Decide from numbers, trust, sleeping space, sanitation, exits, and whether the strongest personalities in the group know how to obey a simple plan. A shelter with one loud fool inside can fail faster than a weaker shelter with 6 disciplined adults. One of the deputies just told us a fuel thief got caught trying to siphon county trucks parked behind the building. He was not some hardened raider. He was a maintenance subcontractor who had worked on public property jobs before and still had access habits in his body. That matters. A lot of the damage in the first phase of collapse comes from people who already know where the side gates are, where the breaker room sits, which door never latches right, which tank gets topped off on Tuesdays, where the spare keys hang, what uniform patch opens conversation, and which supervisor goes home early. Every town has those people. They are not movie villains. They are familiar men sliding one step too far when the center gives way. The roads south of the river are not safe. The roads north are not safe. I wish that sounded more useful than it does. Safety now is temporary and local. An intersection can be passable at 3 in the afternoon, contested at 5, empty at 7, and trapped by 9. That is why so many deaths are happening in transition. People rely on a report that was true 2 hours ago and move into a place already changed by the next rumor, the next theft, the next revenge shooting, or the next convoy. Information decays fast in civil conflict. If you are moving on stale information, you are almost the same as moving blind. A county nurse came down here just long enough to wash blood off her forearms in a utility sink and go back up. She did not say much, just asked for more gauze and whether anybody had seen a charger that fit an older phone. That is the rhythm of it. Not speeches, not rage, just constant friction and sudden injury. People imagine history turns in grand moments. Most of it turns in supply requests and improvised treatment under fluorescent lights. Remember that when somebody online tells you the honorable thing is to die for a slogan by sunrise. A country is held together or pulled apart by work more than by declarations. There is a pattern with children I need adults to hear. Kids read adult faces faster than adult words. If every conversation in your house turns into whispered panic and abrupt silence when a child enters, that child already knows enough to be scared and not enough to feel grounded. Give him jobs he can do. Hand him water bottles to count. Have him keep shoes by the door. Have him help tape names to bags. Let him sleep in clothes he can move in. Fear without role turns into noise and mistakes. Role is not a cure, but it gives a child a place to put his head while adults do the ugly math. A little while ago, a man from Kansas City side sent word that his block had done something smart. They picked one garage as a charging and tool point, one house as medical point, one house as quiet sleeping point for children and older people, and one pair of men only to handle outside contact at the barricade. That is division of labor. That is civilization in miniature. It can still go bad, sure. It can still be captured by the wrong personality, but it is better than 12 houses all trying to be everything at once. If your street is still intact enough to organize, think in functions, not fantasies. Nobody needs a warlord. Every block needs water, watch, rest, tools, and some rule that prevents one loud idiot from turning a problem into a firefight. We lost the outside monitor for about 4 minutes and got it back. During that gap, one of the upstairs men swore he heard tracks clanking and started saying armored vehicles were moving down the avenue. It turned out to be a garbage truck pushed by a tow rig after somebody had set it across a lane. That is not me mocking him. I am making a point. Stress scrambles recognition. If men inside a hardened county building with radios can misread a sound that badly, imagine what random families are doing from behind curtains after dark. Slow down your interpretations. Ask what else a sound could be before you make a decision that gets somebody hurt. There is fresh word from near Hannibal that river traffic has gone almost dead except for isolated security movement and some barges held in place because pilots will not risk uncertain bridge or shore conditions. Again, that sounds distant until you remember what moves by water in normal times. Grain, fuel, aggregate, chemicals, materials that keep other systems running. Once the rivers slow under fear, pressure shifts harder to roads and rail, and those are already breaking. Shortage is a network effect. It does not stay polite and local. It walks. Some of you want to know whether this ends with one side taking capitals and restoring order. Maybe somewhere in the long run. Not soon. Not clean. Too much authority has already leaked downward and sideways into counties, companies, depots, churches, blocks, and armed cliques. Even if a flag goes up over a building tomorrow, a man still has to convince 12 different road crews, sheriffs, pump operators, linemen, and warehouse bosses to obey without hedging. That is the hard part. The American state was built to look permanent from far away. Up close, it runs on people showing up. Once show up breaks, uniforms alone cannot make the gears turn. We are starting to get lists of missing. A son who left St. Charles at noon and never reached Columbia. A mother last seen near a fuel line in O'Fallon. A diabetic uncle turned away from one clinic and not arrived at the next. A box truck crew separated on Interstate 70. We are logging what we can. Name, age, vehicle, route, known condition, last direct contact. If you are sending missing person information through a relay, keep it compact and factual. No long backstory, no blame, no politics. Make yourself searchable. In a broken network, structure saves lives. Rambling does not. There has been at least one local success tonight, and I want it said out loud. A utility crew under escort got a feeder back online for a pocket of homes and a clinic after somebody cut a lock and tried to burn a pad-mounted transformer near a side street. That means somebody still had maps, parts, transport, a chain of command, and the nerve to drive into a hot zone to fix something boring and essential. That is a victory in the only language that matters right now. Not domination, function. Any group claiming to save America while sabotaging water, power, fuel, medicine, and roads is not saving anything. Judge by function. The gunfire has dropped off for the moment. You can feel the building listening. That pause after noise is its own kind of stress because everybody starts expecting the next thing. One of the clerks finally sat down on a crate and ate half a granola bar with both hands shaking. A deputy took off his vest for the first time in hours and just stared at the sweat pattern on his shirt. A radio man laughed because his pencil broke and then got embarrassed for laughing. That is normal enough for tonight. If you are still alive with your people around you, small, normal things will hit you strange. Let them. Then go back to the checklist. If you are in Missouri and trying to decide whether to head for open country, remember open country is not empty country. It has roads, wells, feed, diesel tanks, barns, machine sheds, propane, and fewer official eyes. That means some rural areas are safer for a night and harsher over a week. City people imagine the countryside as breathing room. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a closed circle of family names and one-lane roads where strangers stand out too much to get a second chance. Do not romanticize either direction. Urban blocks and rural lanes both punish bad assumptions. A man from a suburb outside St. Louis passed along something smart his block did after a fake evacuation order circulated. They agreed no household would leave on digital instruction alone. Every departure required a face-to-face check with at least one neighbor and a hard reason that could be spoken in one sentence. That rule stopped 2 families from driving into a corridor later found to be under armed screening. Simple rule, huge value. This is what resilience looks like in practice. Not endless stockpiles alone, not talking tough. Verification habits, clear thresholds, refusal to panic on command. We had one ugly report near a county jail annex where authority got so muddy that no one could tell whether transfers were being processed, abandoned, or staged for recruitment by an outside group. I do not have enough to speak responsibly beyond saying avoid any detention-related site unless you work there and know who is in command. Places that combine fear, locked doors, paperwork, and armed confusion turn bad fast. History gives that lesson over and over, and still people walk toward those sites hoping bureaucracy will protect them. Bureaucracy without trust is just hallways and keys. Another correction. Earlier I mentioned a church lot receiving evacuees from a bus. We now know that lot had to move everyone indoors after rounds started hitting parked vehicles at random from an unknown direction. No direct hit on the sanctuary as of the latest word. Again, this is why static aid points are hard to keep alive unless the surrounding blocks are controlled by people who are disciplined enough not to use every tall structure as a rifle nest. Aid cannot function in a crossfire economy. If you are hearing me from outside Missouri, understand this state is not special except in its geography. Rivers, interstates, rail, warehouses, mixed urban and rural population, military proximity, agricultural dependence, big city nodes, small town memory, and a political culture already primed to distrust competing centers of power. Put that mix in a national legitimacy crisis, and you get what we are living. Missouri is not an exception. It is a clear sample. That is why I keep saying this is not local chaos with a local fix. The country is breaking along the places where systems meet and trust fails. I have been handed the latest route sheet, and it is rough. Interstate 70 remains unreliable and dangerous in central stretches. US 54 around the capital area remains contested and intermittently blocked. US 63 near Columbia remains fragmented. Interstate 44 through parts of the state is passable in some segments, trapped in others, with freight theft and checkpoint issues. Interstate 55 on the east side is unstable near key crossings. Smaller routes are quieter but unverifiable and prone to local hard stops. That is the best, honest answer, and I know it is not the answer people want. People want one road the way people want one leader. This is not that kind of night. Some of the younger men upstairs keep asking when outside help comes. I do not know. Maybe when command settles somewhere hard enough to push corridors back open. Maybe when enough governors and federal offices stop speaking past each other and start trading actual transport guarantees. Maybe when units split clean enough to stop shadowing each other. Maybe when exhaustion forces talks. Maybe after much worse than tonight. I do not know. So until that answer becomes real, you work with the country you have in front of you. Broken county by county, block by block, pump house by pump house, family by family. One thing I can say with confidence is that the men and women keeping notebooks tonight are doing holy work, whether or not they use that word. Names, routes, injuries, fuel levels, water pressure, missing persons, medication needs, transformer status, shift times, generator hours, who has a chainsaw, who has an oxygen concentrator, who has a truck that still runs, which bridge rail got cut, which culvert washed, which gate is jammed, which house has a newborn, which old man should not be left alone with a rifle because his hands shake and his pride is bigger than his judgment. That is the real map of a collapsing country, not the one on television, the notebook. It is late now. Not bedtime late, new phase late. The phase where the first rush of confusion gives way to harder sorting. Which neighborhoods hold? Which roads become dead? Which groups can actually feed themselves? Which men were bluffing? Which leaders can listen? Which ones only know how to escalate? The country will look different by morning than it did at noon, and noon already felt like a different lifetime. If you are alive and under a roof, do not waste the dark on fantasy about how things should be. Use it for the next useful act. I am not going to give you a speech about America, not tonight. Country is not a speech when people are carrying patients through parking lots and writing medicine names on cardboard because printers are dead. Country is the bridge that still lets insulin cross. Country is the lineman who takes an escort and fixes a feeder. Country is the nurse who keeps triaging under bad light. Country is the mechanic who gets the water truck running. Country is the block that does not hand over strangers to the first armed idiot who demands it. If that sounds small to you, you have been spoiled by distance from the systems that keep you alive. We are still here in the basement. The generator is holding. The relay is ugly but working. The road map on the wall is crowded with circles, X marks, arrows, and question marks. Upstairs, men are rotating watch. Down here, the radios keep catching voices from towns that have stopped trusting anything except what comes through a human throat in real time. I understand that. I trust this more too. Static, paper, tired voices, direct correction when we get something wrong. That is more honest than polished certainty from safe rooms. So here is where things stand as of now. Bridges matter. Water matters. Fuel matters. Quiet matters. Verification matters. No side gets your faith for free. Judge every armed group by what it protects, what it steals, how it treats the weak, whether it keeps roads open for medicine, whether it lies about corridors, whether it shoots around civilians, whether it repairs anything, whether it only knows how to take. Stay where you have the strongest routine unless movement is forced by fire, medicine, flood, or direct threat. If you must move, move with fresh information, daylight if possible, and a plan for reversal. Keep written records. Keep your head level. Keep your world as small as it needs to be to stay human. That is the broadcast. That is the truth I have. And for this hour at least, this is still reaching somebody.